Hi, I'm Dale Lind, and welcome to this third in our series of 3 free webinars focused on the topic of engage, inspire, lead, and produce. And the focus has been both on yourself as the leader of your life, and if you have team responsibilities, on your responsibilities as the leader of a team. So tonight we're going to talk about blending diverse individuals into high-performing teams, maybe even a team of superstars. And we're going to take a different approach than what you're probably used to in typical team building webinars or seminars. To begin with, then, let me ask you some key questions. Questions that you might have for yourself. First of all, you might be asking yourself, how can I get my team members to stop wasting time with stupid ideas that won't work? The second question you might sometimes ask yourself is, why can't some people keep their emotions under control? They've got to let everything out. They wear their feelings right here on their sleeve. Why is that? And the third question you might sometimes ask yourself is, when is the boss going to figure out that we could get so much more done around here if he would just let me and everybody else use our best and most productive talents on the job instead of giving us stuff that we really don't care about to do? And then the fourth question you might ask yourself is, why is it that some people drive me crazy? Besides avoiding them, what else can I do? And for that matter, why should I even want to do something else besides avoid them? Well, there are good answers for all of those questions. And I'm going to give you 4 strategies that deals with each one, either collectively or individually. First strategy we're going to discuss is develop your emotional intelligence. You may not understand what that is. A lot of people don't. I ask people regularly in seminars to define emotional intelligence, and to be honest with you, most of them can't. But you will in just a minute or two. You'll be able to. The second strategy is match the talent needs of the job with the individual. In other words, we rely too much on experience. Experience can be gained, but in a previous webinar, webinar 1, I think, we made the point, using Hell's Kitchen as an example, that experience without talent is a possible waste of time. So we're going to talk about how to do that. Going to give you a very simple tool that you can use to match natural talents with the talents needs of the job. We're going to talk about forming a complementary partnership. And then we're going to tell you why you might want to listen to some of the difficult people in your life. My thought is they might have something to say to you. I'm not going to tell you it's going to be easy. I'm not going to tell you you'll ever get to the point where you enjoy it. But I hope you will see by the time we're done tonight that you need it. And even if you have to grit your teeth, you can take it. Well, let's get started with a look at emotional intelligence. And to take us there, I think I'm going to give you some illustrations. As I said a couple of minutes ago, often in the setting of a seminar or even in idle conversation, I ask people if they know what emotional intelligence is. And I find by far most people do not. And yet it is a concept that has been around probably for a long time, but it really started gaining prominence in the mid-1990s. So we're looking at, what is that, over 20 years. And you can sign up for Google Alerts and you'll get articles every day on emotional intelligence. But let me start you off with what I think is a pretty good definition of emotional intelligence. Here it is. Emotional intelligence is the ability to understand, manage, guide, and use your emotions and those of others in positive ways to improve relationships, performance, physical health, and mental well-being. You see, your emotions are a major consumer of your limited energy supply. So by gaining control of your emotions, by developing your emotional intelligence skills, you're going to conserve your energy and put it to better use than maybe senselessly getting angry or losing your temper or, I don't know, anything else, being afraid, spending your time afraid, spending your time wishing you were somewhere else. spending your time in self-doubt, to convert your energy to better uses. That's one of the things emotional intelligence does for you. Now, let's look closer at emotional intelligence. You'll notice from the logo on your screen there that it's a four-part process. The first part and the first step in emotional intelligence is self-awareness. This is where you become aware of yourself, your feelings, your emotions. You learn to sense when you're starting to go into a non-productive emotion. And as you develop your emotional intelligence, your EI in other words, you're going to develop strategies for bringing emotional intelligence under control, bringing those emotions under control, and conserving your energy and doing better. Self-awareness. The second step is self-management then. Once you become aware of your issues, your emotions, and how you feel about things, then you can go into self-management. You can start to sense when you're about to get angry. You can head yourself off at the pass, as it were. The next one is social awareness. Social awareness starts to get you aware of what's going on around you, makes you aware of the emotions of other people, and makes you more sensitive also to how you're coming across to people. You see, you're learning some self-management here, and then it does lead to an enhanced social awareness. And in the process, you're able to develop better relationships. So that is emotional intelligence. Start with self-awareness, learn to sense your emotions, move on to self-management, learn to control your emotions, become more socially aware of what's going on around you, and then on to relationship management. And by the way, folks, this is a relationship world we live in. It's very difficult to succeed at anything professionally, socially, personally, without relying on relationships and without being able to maintain proper productive relationships. So that's a quick look at the overview of emotional intelligence. Now let's go a little bit deeper. There are some benefits to emotional intelligence, and these benefits include, and I think you're going to want some of these. First of all, better, more supportive, creative, productive relationships. Doesn't that sound good? With emotional intelligence, you can actually have better relationships, better friendships. You can improve your relationship with your wife or your husband or your significant other, whatever your relationships happen to be. Your parents even, you can have better relationships once you understand the self-awareness and the social awareness, particularly. That's where that's important. But emotional intelligence will lead to better, more supportive, creative, and productive relationships. And once you have yourself firmly entrenched in positive relationships, you're going to go a lot further in life than you ever thought you would. Then you can expect higher, more creative levels of performance and success. That's what I was just talking about. With emotional intelligence, you will go farther. I believe I mentioned it earlier, but I'll mention it again. The research shows that emotional intelligence, the further up the ladder you go, is more important than intellectual intelligence. Imagine that. What you know just isn't enough. How you use what you know in your relationship with other people is the ultimate determinant of how successful you're going to be. So we've got two benefits so far: better relationships, more creativity. The third one, a more positive and peaceful sense of mental well-being. See, once you're in charge of your own emotions, you'll be a lot more at peace with yourself. Once you understand why you feel as you do, and a little bit later, we're going to explore some of the things that drive our emotions. I think you're going to really enjoy that. So hold on to that thought. We're going to show you how that sense of peace and well-being can develop. And then you'll get improved health and more energy. Wouldn't that be nice? To feel better. It's amazing how much of an impact your emotions, how you feel, in other words, has on how you feel, on your health. If you get up in the morning and start thinking about a certain ache and pain, you might actually get yourself to the point where you can't even get out of bed. I was at a seminar about 8-9 days ago on fibromyalgia. This lady presenting the seminar had fibromyalgia so serious that there were times when she would wake up and immediately know she couldn't get out of bed that day. But as she learned more about emotional intelligence, as she took control of her emotions, as she began to feed herself other messages instead of saying, "Ooh, this is bad, stay in bed," well, there's more to life than this became her new mantra. And pretty soon she's off all of her medication. That's pretty amazing because she was debilitated by by fibromyalgia. So improved health is a real benefit of emotion. Now that we have a basic working understanding of what emotional intelligence is, you've seen the definition, you've learned a little bit about the 4 aspects of emotional intelligence, let's look at some key emotional intelligence skills that need to be learned. And the very first one is accept responsibility. Got to ask yourself, who's in the driver's seat in your life? The answer should be, you are. The answer should be, for me, I am. So if there are things in my life that I'm not satisfied with, if my emotions somehow are getting in my way, maybe I get angry at the drop of the hat, and I can remember situations where at the first hint that I was going to be denied what I wanted, anger would shoot up like a geyser, and I wouldn't get anywhere. I had to accept responsibility for that. I had to realize that I was the only one who could change that. So what do you begin thinking about what you need to take responsibility for in your life? And that leads us to the second emotional intelligence skill, and that's honest self-appraisal. Think about your emotions for a moment. Why do you have them? It's important to realize that emotions are linked to memories that probably began happening and forming patterns in our lives by the time we were at the age of 7. Yes, that's true. Your emotional intelligence, as far as it has gone in your life, is pretty well formed by the age of 7. What you believe to be true about life is pretty well formed by the age of 7. So in honest self-appraisal, not only do you have to identify the specific things that you believe are standing in the way of your ability to succeed at the level that you should succeed, but you have to go back and try to trace the memories of events that created those feelings in you that are holding you back. And then you can prepare growth plans. Growth plans based on what you've discovered in your honest self-appraisal. The third emotional intelligence skill that we'll discuss is define your boundaries and your limitations. In this, you're going to have to look at your talents, and we've been doing a little bit of that, haven't we? In the previous 2 webinars, I've introduced to you my laser talent assessment tool or talent discovery tool, and you've had a chance to take a look at it and have begun to learn a little bit about yourself through the examples that I've shared with you. And tonight I'm going to share even more depth with you in a little while. But you have to know your boundaries. You have to know what you're naturally good at. I've said it before, I'll say it again. The more we stay within our natural, built-in, wired right into the DNA talents that come with us, hardwired from actually birth, the more likely we are going to be successful. But these talents are there just waiting to be discovered, and once discovered they have to be developed. You don't just automatically jump out and become great at something. But it's best to find out what your natural propensities are. Got to know about your authority. How much authority do you have to act anyway? You've got to define your boundaries to act within the scope of your responsibilities, the amount of authority you have. You might want to push it a little bit once in a while, but you're going to get in trouble if you exceed it. You're going to want to look at what your skills are. You're going to want to look at what your values are. And maybe you haven't thought of the values in your life as being boundaries for you, but they truly are. You cannot afford to act outside the scope of your natural values and the purpose that they describe for your life. The fourth tool is build quick stress reduction responses based on your natural learning style. Stress is a major killer. Stress breeds heart attacks. Stress breeds explosions. Stress breeds fogginess of the brain. Stress robs you of your energy. And there is a good side to it, because sometimes you should be stressed. If you're standing in the middle of a highway looking for something you drop while crossing the road and you hear the sounds of a heavy truck approaching at high speed, you should feel enough stress to get out of the way. That is legitimate. But if you're sitting there, you've got a deadline and you're almost but not quite done, and you're watching the clock and you're thinking, I'm not going to make it, well, that's stress that's probably slowing you down rather than speeding you up. And whatever comes up, stress, mostly driven by our fears. A friend of mine once said, don't tell me it doesn't do any good to worry. Nothing I ever worried about happened. Now, that makes a point, I suppose. But we do worry about many things that just never happen, and they aren't likely to happen. So when you feel stress building up inside of you, and you know the signals, you probably do. Some of us go through that beginning to explosion cycle so fast, but you can feel stress. And the way you should deal with that stress is to a great extent based in your natural learning style. Scientists have defined 3 different kinds of learning. Visual, I have to see it. Auditory, I have to hear it. Kinesthetic, I have to reach out and touch it or actively get involved in it. I think I'm a combination of all of those, but I can tell you that at least in school, nothing much ever made sense to me just sitting there listening to the lecture. If the teacher was working problems on the board, well, that sort of began to move from visual to kinesthetic. I've got to get my hands in there and touch it. Well, stress relief is based on the same platform. You see, if you are a visual learner, then look at something that relaxes you. Maybe I know when I'm feeling down, and as I said, I'm a little bit of all of these things, and there are situations when if I pull up a picture of one of my grandchildren, I start smiling. Guess what? Stress disappears. Does that work for you? Is there something that always makes you smile? For me, as I said, it's grandchildren. What always makes you smile? Keep a picture of that handy when you feel the stress building up. Well, some people are auditory. Soft music. I don't have the patience for soft music. Soft music makes me daydream, and sometimes that makes the stress worse. Seeing something like a picture of my grandchildren, or a favorite scene from my trip to Yosemite, where I was fortunate enough to get some really excellent pictures. Those are all relaxing to me. But touch, I wish I had one here. Well, here's something right here that really is very helpful for me. Our dog Sable, great dog, died at the age of 14 about 2 years ago. Miss her a lot. My daughter had this made for me. See, it's a stone that says Sable. You know what? I think, kinesthetically speaking, touching it, this is extremely relaxing for me, just to take this stone. It helps me think of Sable. I used to really get a lot of satisfaction out of petting her, relaxing her. So I keep this stone on my desk. And right now, I'm feeling relaxed. In fact, if I don't put it down, I just may go to sleep. That's how relaxed something like that is for me. So, what makes you control your stress? You need a quick stress reduction response. Get up, start singing, whatever works for you. Don't worry about whether you sound crazy. Just do it. Now the fifth one, control the survive drive, empower the thrive drive. What does that mean? Interesting. Let's take a look at it. I think you'll like it. Here's a question for you. Is it enough to survive, or do you want to actually thrive? Well, it turns out that built inside of us are two drivers. There are many more, but in terms of our emotions and our feelings, there are two drivers. There is a drive to survive. We can call that the survivor drive if you want. And the drive to thrive. You can call that the thriver drive, and I do actually believe I've looked that up, and there is such a word as thriver. You can call them survivor and thriver at the same time, if you like, for short. But your survive drive is all about protecting you. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's going back to an illustration I used a little while ago, where if you're standing in the middle of that road and you hear the truck coming, the drive to survive says, get out of the way. Might even say there's something wrong with you. See that here? There might even be something wrong with you. Get out of the way. And there's nothing wrong with it. That's appropriate. But here's what might happen. You see, if you have enough of those experiences, you might start hearing a message from your survive drive that is holding you back. Might say, it's your fault. You were really stupid. You better stay away from the road, you see. And so we might do that. We might retreat into guilt. Boy, that was stupid to be looking for that quarter I dropped in the middle of the highway or the middle of the freeway. That didn't make sense at all. But you have your thriver whose message is, hey, yeah, maybe you did screw up, but it's a learning opportunity. Look for the lesson and grow. That's what we should do, you see. But your survivor is probably, for most of us, the loudest voice. And we probably get these messages. You are not worthy. It's your fault. Or it's their fault. You know, the blame game. Nothing's ever my fault. It's always someone else's fault. So we don't ever take responsibility. Oh, I can never catch a break. You know, other ways of saying it's their fault. Or every time I get close to the top, someone pushes me back down. We avoid responsibility, but the message of the thriver says, accept responsibility, learn and move on. See, we need to be accountable for our choices. So take a moment and look at this chart. I'm going to give you a few seconds just to consider this chart. Maybe 20 seconds. Time goes slower than you think it might. But take a look at this chart and ask yourself this question. Are any of these messages from the survive drive standing in my way? And if they are, then I've got to learn over or go over here and learn to tap into the power of my thrive drive. Before I give you time to think about it on your own, I'm going to take this one in my own experience. Stick with what you know. There's too much risk of failure. Probably 30 years ago, but even before that, someone told me, a professional actually, tested me and told me I should be a writer. For the last 30 years, well, not quite, because I did write a couple of books, but I spent 20 years afraid to try, satisfying myself with the thought that a professional had told me that I could do it, but afraid to test it. You know what? When I finally wrote that book, when I made it a point to try something new, it turned out that it was a pretty good book. Pretty good book. People liked it. So now take about 20 seconds or so and see which one of these negative messages you need to replace with a positive message. Which survive message are you getting that really should be a thrive message? If you got one of those messages, and I think you might very well have, what I'd like you to do is create a positive statement for yourself that's a little more specific than this. See, in other words, the message here, the general message is, I should try something new. And what I actually had to replace it with was, you do have a book inside of you. Just start writing. And lo and behold, it turned out, as I said, to be a pretty good book. Now, I don't want to leave this without making sure you understand. We have built up this survive drive as a protection device. The survivor voice means well by us. The survivor voice wants to protect us, doesn't want us to try things because, well, we're just not good enough. Just doesn't want us to move out of this. It's your fault. And feel bad, go ahead, feel bad, enjoy it, because it's going to protect you from ever putting yourself in a situation like that again. You see? I hope that makes sense to you. But we can't stop listening to the survivor voice, like when we're standing in the middle of that busy highway. But we're hardly ever standing in the middle of a busy highway with a truck bearing down on us, are we? Very seldom does anything that big happen in our lives. We need to learn to accept responsibility. We need to learn to take a mistake instead of saying, it's my fault, I really screwed up, or oh, it's their fault. We need to accept responsibility and try to learn from it. I hope this is helpful to you. Now, I want to move on to another topic, the topic of talent-based job descriptions. You'll notice some statements here on this and the next page where I decided to highlight the 10 top talents needed for success in, an administrative job, let's just say. Not a real job. I just went through, I wanted the top 10. You'll notice that here are the captain talent statements. There are 16 of them. Here are the cheerleader talent statements, another 16. On the next slide, we have 32 more statements. So there's a lot to choose from. But to use this instrument properly, and you have it in your handout, and I hope you've printed out your notes. I hope you have. But you can use this tool by identifying a specific job. In this case, I took some kind of administrative job, and identifying the 10 top talents. Now, not all the talents, just the top 10, actually, probably to be more sensible, somewhere between 5 and 7, but I thought I would just pick 10. You can look at your chart, and you might not agree that an administrative position requires these kind of talents, but I just picked them, so that's what I thought I would do. I'll get to these red boxes here in a minute. Just don't worry about them for now. But this is what I concluded the individual needed to have to be successful in his or her job. They had to be confident. They had to have focus, pursuing goals. They had to be able to initiate, manage, and drive change. They had to be good at coaching to help others learn and grow. They had to be good at networking. They had to be reliable, logical, empathetic. They had to be quality-oriented, and they had to be loyal, unwavering allegiance. So, how are you going to tell if an individual has these characteristics? Have you ever heard of behavioral interviewing? Behavioral interviewing is a time-tested concept of asking questions based on past performance in order to predict future performance. The science is that past performance is the best predictor of future performance. All too often, and man, have I seen it, examples of it very recently, within the last week or so, actually. when sitting down to interview someone, they know what they want to do, and so they say, well, I want someone who is confident. And they might say, so if you're facing something you've never faced before, a new challenge, what would you do? Well, do you think they're going to tell you that they'd quail in fear and run and hide? No, because they want the job. So they would say, well, I'm a very confident person, blah, blah, blah. But if you put it in behavioral terms and describe a scenario, describe a time when you faced a really big challenge that could have been a maker or a breaker for your career. Tell me what the challenge was and how you handled it. See, that's a good behaviorally based screening question. And take this, the chart, it's a full chart, the 64 talents. You don't have one that looks like this. I just extracted this from the one that you have. But take your chart and pick a job, outline the top 5, 6, 7 talents, and then construct screening questions. What did you do? A scenario. I'll give you an example. One of my favorites, actually, housekeeper sitting in one of my seminars a few years ago. I knew him, and his name was Larry, and we'd done stuff before, and so he knew where I was headed, and I made a mistake at this portion of the training program. I meant to say, Larry, tell me about a time when a nurse on a hurry walked across your freshly mopped floor. I meant to say, what did you do? But I said, Larry, what would you do? And Larry knew there was a difference, and he said, Dale, do you want me to tell you what I would do or what I did do? And I said, Larry, thank you for straightening me out. Tell me what you did do. And his answer was, I hit her across the butt with a wet mop. Now, if you want your nurses or your secretaries or your bookkeepers hit across the butt with wet mops, well, maybe you want to hire Larry. You have to decide if the answer you get is sensible. The reason this works is that most people, is it 100% foolproof? No, it isn't. But most people have a hard time coming up with a lie when you've asked for a specific example. And the second trick in this, in addition to phrasing it as a what did you do, is be willing to wait until silence pries an answer. We don't like silence. We tend to interrupt them and we say things, stupid things like, well, that's all right, we can come back to this. No, sit there, read a book if you have to, but wait till they come up with something, and the longer they take, the more certain you can be that they're having a hard time coming up with something they think will sound good, but they will come up with something, and if it's not so good, they'll justify it for you, and then you can make a good screening decision. Well, a complementary partner. I remember those red boxes from a couple of slides back. What do I mean by a complementary partner? Well, folks, this may surprise you, but I'm not good at everything. In the jobs that I've had, I've picked out probably the 3 things that I am absolutely worse at. If the paperwork is left up to me, it's going to be a mess. If we have to rely on structure, I may know how to build it, but I can't stand to work under structure. So I'm always looking for the shortcuts and details, keeping an eye on the little things. Boy, I'll miss them. If a detail was a snake, it would bite me, to be honest with you. I'm bad at this. So I picked out the 3 things that I am worse at. A complementary partner is someone who is good at these things. I was fortunate to have Betty, Jean, and a host of others, very good, accomplished administrative assistants who helped me deal with the paperwork aspect of things. I had a compliance person who was very good at policy and procedure. And I had a chief financial officer who kept an eye on the little things. I had different partners for each one of these things. But if you're not the boss, and I was fortunate enough to be the boss at the time, find somebody on your team that is better at paperwork than you are. Find out what they don't like so much, and maybe you can take that over. But that's the secret to finding a complementary partner. Find someone who can keep you on track if you start to violate policy. Have someone you can run to and say, this is what I'm thinking of doing. Do you think this will be all right in a policy situation? Or details, can you help me out a little bit here? I painted my way through college, actually through boarding academy too, now that I think about it. And we had a saying, old Jim DeLay and me, we painted a lot together. He was the boss and I wasn't. But we were also very good friends. Just a little testimonial here. He made everything possible for me in the work that he gave me. He really made it possible for me to have the things that I was able to have and to achieve the things I was able to achieve. But he had a saying, you see, when we were up on a 20-foot extension ladder, 40-foot extension ladder, and painted a section, we didn't want to have to step back from the house after taking our equipment down and discover that there were big mistakes there. He called them holidays. So when we were each done painting a section, we'd meet in the middle and he'd say, okay, now you come to my side, you look at my work, I'll look at your work. And he could always find what he called holidays where I had missed spots, and not quite as frequently, but I could find them where he missed. And yet each one of us had thought that we had everything right. So find a complementary partner for yourself. It's tremendously. Let's take a look at the difficult people in your life. Do you have someone in your life who drives you crazy? Well, think about this. The person who drives you crazy probably has something important to share with you if only you would develop the courage and the patience to stop what you're doing and listen. And it's not easy to listen to these different people whose perspectives in life are so much different than ours, those who drive us crazy. I often say, though I don't do it as often anymore now that we have more partnerships sometimes and we have marriages in a same group of people, but I used to say, think about that person who drives you crazy, and there's a very good chance, after a little pause, that you're married to them. Now I have to say married, or they're your significant other, or you spend a lot of time with them, or something along those lines. But to this day, there's always a significant titter of laughter because it's true. We have sort of a funny little internal radar that sends us to people who are not like us, who don't have the same personality, structure, preferences, and talents that we have. And we go out, we look for that individual almost automatically, that little radar that I talked about, or sonar if we're swimmers, I suppose. And then we can't stand the advice and the feedback they give us. In the business world, this is often called a devil's advocate. Interesting research with devil's advocacy. Teams that have a strong, courageous devil's advocate who speaks up and challenges groupthink are more creative and productive than teams who don't have such a devil's advocate. The other interesting thing about that is, though, if given an opportunity to get somebody off the team, they'll almost always get rid of the devil's advocate. Interesting. They will cut out the very heart of what makes them successful just because they don't like the stress involved in dealing with it. So, that's a devil advocate. And think back to the talent chart. If you've got your handout ready, go back to the talent chart that we looked at a few minutes ago. And just look at your lowest area. Find that little box, that little list of 16 talents that you feel as a whole is your area of weakness. And think about what a person like that would be like. I do this exercise in my live seminars. I group people by their weaknesses, and when I ask them to describe that kind of person, it's almost always negative, virtually always negative. The people who drive us crazy quite often is just because their personality, their talents, their perspective is different than ours. And remember that complementary partner that we talked about in just a few minutes ago? Well, quite probably they're going to drive you crazy in many ways too. I used to tell people, You've got to tell me when I stray off course. I can promise you that I'll always know that I need it, but I cannot promise you that I'll always be glad or gracious to receive it. So think about an individual you're having trouble with, getting along with. What is it that they do that bothers you? And then ask yourself very honestly, might it just be that their talent set is different than yours, and that maybe, just maybe, that little burr under your saddle, that little pea under the mattresses if you're a princess, just maybe they have something to tell you that you should learn from. Well, there's a lot more I want to share with you. So in the next few days, might be as much as 2 weeks, I'm going to make you an offer that I hope you won't be able to refuse. I'm going to offer you an opportunity to go deeper into all of the things we've studied, to have my complete program for your very own, my complete program for Engage, Inspire, Lead, and Produce. It will be a full and highly detailed program. I'm going to break it down into half-hour sized, bite-sized chunks with worksheets so that you can implement. And I don't even care whether you conduct a seminar using what I provide with your team. I'd be happy to do that. But I'm going to give you that so that you can learn in more depth how to have that motivating sense of mission, how to understand your leadership style. You'll be given an opportunity to choose whether you want to take my online version or whether you're going to be satisfied just going through the seminar version, which we will do in webinar setting. I'll give you time, as I've done the last couple of webinars, to complete the exercises and even have some discussion. Now, these webinars have been free. I hope they have established that I have some things to share with you that may be valuable. These other webinars won't be free, but I'm not going to reach through the computer screen, grab your wallet, and take your money. It'll be your choice. So if you would like to enjoy what I've been able to enjoy in a career going back to 1969, where I can truthfully say that I have spent very few days doing things that I didn't like doing in all of those 45, 46 years, whatever it is, of professional life since 1969. I want to show you how you can have that for yourself. Now, how do you know if these webinars are going to be right for you? Well, very simply, if you're part of a team that's suffering with task-focused, uninspired, and plotting leadership, then my Engage, Inspire, and Lead system should help improve morale, help improve lack of motivation, resolve team conflict and infighting through better understanding, should even lower staff turnover. If you participate in this program, I think you'll know how to develop other leaders by getting them in touch with their own personal style. So I hope you'll consider it. I'll give you those details in the next couple of weeks. As I said, I won't feed it to you all at once. You'll get it in bite-sized chunks, and I hope you'll consider it. Until then, thank you for being part of this webinar series.